Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here again at the Carbon to Sea Convening. I'm Sylvain, I work at Carbon Gap. Carbon Gap is a non-for-profit European organization trying to advance as fast as possible the CDR policy so that we can, as Artie was suggesting, go from the lab to the field. So today, I'm going to try to provide a snapshot of where we are in Europe in terms of advancing policy relevant to marine CDR and in particular OAE. So I'll start with some basics for those of you who are not in the weeds of policy and European policy. So this is the plan in Europe in terms of climate targets. So the Union is aiming for a reduction of 55% of net emissions by 2030. They recently passed new targets for 2040, aiming for a net reduction of minus 90, net zero by 2050, and net negative thereafter. This is already in the law. It's not very well articulated how and how much, but it's already in the law. In Europe, we have a policy architecture around three pillars: effort sharing regulation. Well, I'll start with land use and land use change. So that's the well-known land sector, let's say. Then the emission trading scheme, ETS, which covers a lot of industrial emissions and has a trajectory to go down. And then effort sharing regulation is what covers the remaining parts. So with that architecture, the aim is to cover all the emissions and to progress them on the downward path. This architecture is now up for revision. So this year, there's a lot of active debate on where we go next with this architecture to reach the targets. In Europe, we have a co-legislator involving three different bodies. So one is the European Commission that propose and execute the regulations. We have the Council that represents the member states and the government. And then the European Parliament with MPs directly elected by the citizens of Europe. In this traditional framing, the Commission proposes new regulations, and then to have a simple read, the European Parliament used to have a more progressive stance, trying to push the regulation forward and to more ambition, and then Council was traditionally more conservative, I would say, and trying to bring it back to realities as a simplistic approach. Well, this changed quite a bit last year with the election of the European Parliament, and I would say power has shifted. Also, the roles have evolved a little bit. In particular, the Parliament is now very fragmented, and there is strong influence of the far-right agenda, which means that it has lost a little bit its role of pushing for ambition. The Commission is also a little bit weakened, and the agenda is now mostly driven by capitals. So the game has changed, I would say, to progress policies. So why OAE matters for Europe? We have several trends that are concerning, particularly around the LULUCF sector, the land sector, which is declining, and that needs to be compensated. Biomass availability is also becoming a bit of a challenge for the land-based removals, for example, and geologic storage is not progressing as fast as expected. On the other side, there is a massive exclusive economic zone in the maritime space, including different seas with different conditions. There's a lot of coastal infrastructure, and we also have interesting players in the field operating in Europe. So for all these reasons, that makes OAE an interesting tool for the CDR portfolio of the Union. So several areas of opportunity that we are working on in Europe. The ETS, I mentioned it. This is a little bit. This is the long game, I would say. Integration into the ETS, which is a compliance framework, so quite predictable, solid, and large scale. There are ongoing conversations around the research and innovation funding to revamp the whole architecture of the research and innovation funding with what we call the framework program number 10, which is the continuation of Horizon Europe, for those of you who know that. And in that, there will be a CDR component. So there are a lot of conversation of what that should be, what that should be covered, and how it should be structured. And then there is an active debate also on certification with a regulation called the Carbon Removal and Carbon Farming Regulation, which aims to provide like a standard of the EU to certify carbon removal activities. So I'll go one by one quite quickly. ETS, as I said, is the long game. Some of the CDR methods like DAX and BEX are expected to be included in the revision, but that's still a very active debate, and actually there were also recent attacks against the ETS altogether, so it's not a a game that is won already. There's a lot of risk around this. But this will be discussed this year, and we expect a report by end of Q2. So that will be interesting, and then longer term, there could be a prospect of integrating OAE. Now, the certification mechanism that I mentioned is already in operation. This is a list of the methods that are covered at the moment by the CRCF. The green ones have been passed, so they are now effective, and private registries will start operating them. Yellow ones are still in discussions, and then the gray ones are the more prospective ones, and there you can see OAE. I will unpack a little bit further. Interestingly, the UK is conducting a similar exercise in parallel with an organization called PSI. So there are always interesting comparisons to be made between the two initiatives. This is the process as we know it for the generation of certification methodology under the CRCF, which in the first phase took up to 2 years. Maybe that will become a bit faster in the future. So it's an iterative process by which the Commission proposes a draft, and then it gets commented on by the expert group, but also by a broader circle of stakeholders, and then iteration up until the point where we can agree on what we call delegated acts, and then when these are approved, the certification becomes effective, which is the case for DAX and BEX and biochar at the moment. OAE completed step 1, which is the first scoping by the Commission with a technical scoping paper, as we call them. Maybe some of you have read them. Now the question mark is where do we go next? And the problem is that because of everything we heard this morning, the sort of policy readiness and certification readiness of OAE is maybe not there yet. So the Commission is a little bit wondering what they should do with that. And there's also some pushback still being voiced in Europe within the academic community on this sort of concept. And so what we're working on at the moment is to try to create this yellow brick that you can see on the screen, which is sort of a pre-step to certification process where you increase the readiness by conducting particularly those research activities that we still miss to lower uncertainty to levels that would be compatible with certification. Then just two last slides before I finish my short time. Just for you to be aware, we have an EU MCDR working group being operating since last summer. Some of you have attended or are part of it. This is a very important resource and platform for us to increase alignment and also to inform the EU, leveraging the expertise of the sector. I think what this community is doing is incredibly solid and good. It needs to be made more visible to policymakers and stakeholders so that people understand that it's not about rushing, but we know what we're doing. Time is running out. I'll jump to the learnings, or maybe I shouldn't. Okay, very quickly. I think for us, what we see is that there is this forever research stance that we observe in the ecosystem, which is a bit problematic because, yes, we need more research, but we need to be practical about it. What is it? How long it will take and what is good enough? It's been mentioned several times, very important. I think also when it comes to OAE, we also depend a little bit on what happens on the broader CDR governance, because if we want to create trust, it also depends on what other methods are doing and the policy mix on these methods is being built. So just encouraging the community to remain, I suppose, connected with the other streams, because this is very important. There is appetite for this reasonable tactical approach, the yellow brick I mentioned, so this is something we really want to push forward. In terms of enablers, pilots like the one we visited yesterday are incredible resources, because this is real things happening with real data that people can look at and comment. The growing literature that we've also seen some figures is very important. And in terms of blockers, I would just mention one precedent we had in the CRCF in Europe, which was biochar, where I think the debate was not well conducted and it is now backfiring. So really encourage this community to keep doing the good work you're doing and go stepwise, because these phenomena are inevitable if we rush the thing. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening, and happy to engage with you guys if you have more questions.